And at the second giving of the law, the children of Israel are on the eastern bank of the Jordan River. And they are looking across. Jericho's not far away. Remember Jericho? And Moses is told by God, you need to tell them what the previous generation heard, because when they go into the land, this is the law they need to abide by. It needs to organize their life and their worship. And so that brings us to this book of Deuteronomy. And we've already looked at chapters 1 through 4. We're looking this morning at chapter 7 and following. And I want you to think about this. Your opposition is too great. Your opposition is too great. Listen, I just read a letter to you. And that's not abnormal. There is opposition to what you and people in Portugal and other places serving the Lord are facing. Your opposition is too great for you. Your progress often isn't what you want it to be. I mean, honestly, isn't that the truth? Wouldn't you love to see people get saved faster than they are? I'm just looking around and people that I know, you wish they were saved 20 years ago. And it's not happened yet. Not happened yet, right? You like to see Christians grow faster than they did, and sometimes we forget about us. We think that we are lightning speed growers, and we weren't, right? Some of you probably think the same thing. Why are they growing so slow? You want to see things change. You're praying on Wednesday nights, you're praying with one another on the phone, and you want to see God change things. And many of those things are right to be praying about for God to change. But why does it seem so slow? Why? And you don't seem like you got what it takes, honestly, right? You don't have what it takes to get all this stuff to change. I'm talking to some people right now that it's pretty humbling. The just have to live by faith, right? If there's anyone in here who is the just one and living by faith, what I just described, you know about. You have seen this. I don't see how you miss this. I don't see how you avoid what we just described if you're a just one living by faith, which is every real, vibrant believer, living spiritually alive believer. It is humbling when we want to make a difference in a workplace. I want to think about your workplace, when the minds and the jokes of people around you are just what they are, right? And if you say, I'm not in the workplace, remember when you were, right? I think one of the great values for me of being at Walmart here months ago was to be reminded this is the mission field that we are dealing with. Thank God for that. It's difficult to feel like you're making progress. When you're in a school environment, and I know our kids are around here somewhere, I'm thinking mostly of our public school kids, are trying to make a difference in their school, and the LGBTQ issues are being treated as if it's just normal. This is what's happening. One of the things I learned in being involved in Child Evangelism Fellowship and rubbing shoulders, that this is not a shock anymore. It's being treated as normal. That's discouraging for students who are trying to stand for Christ. And they can't see themselves making a big difference in all of this. Or how about when you try to make a difference in your family and they just flat out ignore you? I've mentioned to several of you, I remember the day when people actually reacted negatively toward the gospel when you shared it with them. Do you remember that happening years ago? They didn't want to hear it. Today they don't really care. Their opposition is that that's you. Yeah. I'm not that. It's hard to feel like you're making progress, like you even have the necessary stuff to make a difference. Now, I'm not just talking about me. I talked with somebody in this church this past week, or I should say I'm aware of a person in this church this past week who faced this very thing. You saw a guy in Portugal facing this. And how many of you don't face this? If you're living for the Lord, you're going to face this. You try to share the gospel, you get this huge opposition. Why am I saying all these things? It's because this is exactly what the Hebrew children on the eastern side of the Jordan River in Deuteronomy were facing. This is it. They were facing giants. They looked at these people and said, there's no way. There's giants in the land. And you know what, folks? Sometimes we imagine giants as we try to make a difference. They weren't making this up. These were genuine giants in the land. And they overwhelmed them. They looked at their progress. If you're back with us, God willing, in a week, you're going to see this even more clearly. They looked at their progress, and the progress just looked so slow. I mean, they got into 40 years in the wilderness. That's a long time. How many days should that have been? How about 11, at least to start the invasion anyway, right? 40 years. It's a long time. It's too slow. And then when they get into the promised land, this is where it's going to be easy, right? Because we're obeying God, we're following God across the Jordan River, and it's still going too slow. Why? This has got to go faster than this. And there are times in this whole thing when they're in the desert land, when they seem to lack even the most basic stuff. I'm not talking about weapons. I'm talking about water. Food. No food, no water. That's a bad combination, don't you think? You got to ask yourself the question, why? Might surprise you, but God was in all of that. He wasn't working in spite of it. He was working through it. It was all part of the plan. Now, I hope even saying that brings a light of encouragement to some soul today, because you ain't alone. And you never have been, right? You got a whole nation that's facing this stuff, right? So it was, can I call it this? And Neil, you'll appreciate this wherever you are, being a teacher. It was God's curriculum for Israel. And it got summarized with one word. Well, this morning, we want to focus on one word, and the word is this. God's curriculum for his people, Old Testament, and sitting right in front of me, is this word, humility. All of what I just mentioned, that'll just bring you low, won't it? It's too slow. That's humbling. I don't have the right stuff. That's humbling. People don't listen to me. How soon? That's humbling, right? And know that God's not gone. He is in it, using it as the curriculum, at least for you. And certainly for these dear saints of God in the Old Testament. So it's your curriculum too. Okay? And mine. And he's promised the blessing, you're going to see this, the promise that God gave them is, don't worry, I will be with you every step. So we're going to look at chapters 7 through 10, but this morning we'll look at God's curriculum of humility. Look with me at chapter 7, verses 1 through 3. When the Lord your God brings you into the land where you are entering to possess it, and clears away many nations before you, I really gave you a tough passage this morning, Neil, sorry about that. The Hittites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Why would God take the time? Does he really have to list these people out? So, the Spirit of God doesn't make mistakes. What's the effect of him listing these things, these nations out? These are real problems. These are real people, and there are lots of them, right? 7 nations. He's going to be the one who clears them out from before you, not you. And he gives all these names. And then he says in verse 1, 7 nations greater and stronger than you. Now follow this. You're going to be up against 7 Canaanite nations. Those are bad odds. Those are not good odds. I'm telling you right now. You came through the wilderness. You're about ready to face these people. And if that weren't enough, I could be wrong about this, but I think he might be saying, and any one of these nations is more than enough of a challenge for you. Any one of them. But there are going to be 7. You ever mornings like that? I mean, just one of these things would have been enough, Lord. But there's 7, there's 10 of them. He said, that's going to happen I don't know if you remember, well, you probably do, you older kids, my age, and older, used to be kids years ago. I know your kids don't think that, but you know better. Stuff they're going through, a lot of it, you remember this stuff. A lot of it you do. You remember your mom and your dad saying to you, I'm just going to tell you what you need to do. And I'm not necessarily going to give you a full explanation as to why. And yes, that's not going to be satisfying for you. But it doesn't have to be. All you have to do is what? It sounds like a shoe commercial. You just do it. You trust me and do it. Sometimes explanations are wonderful, aren't they? And you know what? When we can give our kids good Bible explanations, we do that. But eventually you're going to reach the end of your explanation and they're going to want more. And the next word is, listen, you just do it by the grace of God. So God gives them that command. So you Hebrews, he's saying to them, I don't want you leaning to what you think is right under these circumstances. And in these first three verses, well, look at the verses 2 and 3. Then when the Lord, your God, delivers them, because he's going to, before you, and you defeat them, then you shall utterly destroy them. Here's where I want to focus. You shall make no covenant with them and show no favor to them. Furthermore, if that weren't enough, you shall not what? I don't want you marrying them. You shall not give your daughters to their sons, nor shall you take their daughters for your sons. Why would he have to say? That still needs to be said today. Because to do this, would this really be tempting? You better believe it. The temptation would have been, there's just got to be a better way. You want us to conquer. I think maybe we could go in there and make a deal. Let's set up this treaty. That was done all the time. And part of that treaty sometimes involved giving and taking in marriage. That was actually pretty slick when you think about it. This wasn't just an encouragement to be romantic with the enemy. This is a way of guaranteeing that the enemy will never attack you because the enemy is married to you. Great idea, don't you think? God said, no. I know that might sound like a really good idea to you. You know what, young people? That might sound like a good idea to you. But he looks so nice. He's so cute. I'm sure that I could convince him. That's not clear thinking. God didn't ask the Hebrews, I would like your counsel on this. He knew that if they intermarried and if they built in all these treaties, they may get some land, and that was the goal. You can do that. You can marry into land. It was done in the Old Testament. But the problem is you also marry into family gods. That's a problem. And that was a serious problem in the book of Judges later on. They married, they got involved in false worship, and read the book of Judges and you tell me the profit in doing that which is right in your own eyes. This is a humbling plan for victory. What God is giving to them. I want you just to follow what I'm telling you to do. I don't want you to try to reason through this the way the world does. I want you to be holy. That's my goal. You know what that means? We sang that a few minutes ago. That meant, part of what that means is I want you to separate away from any temptation to draw up a treaty or a marriage with the enemy, and I want you to draw close to me. Do you follow that? It wasn't, I just want you to stay away from him. I want you to be close to me. And I realize in the New Testament times, that we are to invade the lost land around us, and that is true. But there's some lessons about holiness in all this too. You better be careful. Moms and dads, just be careful with your kids. Kids, be careful. If you and I think that we're smarter than God, you already know that we're not. So be careful about this. It's a humble plan for victory because it's not the way they would have thought about this. Look with me at verses 6 through 8, chapter 7. For you are a holy people to the Lord your God. Get that? You are to and for the Lord your God. It's not just be different to be weird. No. You are to draw near to me. That's going to change you in some ways because you're going to see this in a few minutes, because I love you. I'm committed to you. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his own possession. Out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth, the Lord did not set his love on you, nor choose you because you were more in number than any of the peoples, for you were the fewest of all peoples, but because the Lord loved you and kept the oath which he swore to your forefathers. The Lord brought you out by a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery and from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. That's a humbling, I'm going to put it this way. Now you're seeing a humbling acceptance. How does God accept people? Only through humility. And you're going to see it here in just a moment. There's this humbling acceptance. God, in essence, is saying, you might ask yourself, you Hebrews at this point, you're poised in the bank of the Jordan River, you might ask yourself, why would God choose us to enter into the promised land anyway? I mean, why us, of all people? And God's response is, because I love you. There it is. I love you. But the reason why he loves them is not because of anything that impressed him about them. So don't think that I chose to, this is so different from us. Don't think I looked at you and said, man, you got prospects, right? You got nothing. He chose a nation. This is on purpose. How often does he do this? He chooses nothing. A nothing somebody, a person's scared, they're nothing, right? Person doesn't have it all together. They don't have the resources they need. They don't have water and bread. I'm choosing a nothing here, right? Yeah. And I'm going to love you in spite of what you are. And you're not going to be able to figure that out because it's grace. So don't. I chose you. You know what, dear saint? Every last person here needs to remind themselves of this. You know, God, it might sound strange for me to say this, but God is not interested in building up I kept trying to remember what the word is, your self-image. Did you know that? He's not interested in self-image growth. He's already giving you an eyeful. The Hebrews, he's telling you don't have a self-image, right? 0, outnumbered. Don't think you're morally better than them either. Because you're not. You're just like them. You're just as bad as the Canaanites. Say, Pastor, I just got to hope for a little more encouragement than that. Well, the encouragement is that God loves because he chooses to. And there it is. And that will be someday in heaven, dear friend. If you're not in awe, if you and I are in awe of that here, but wait until that day. Nobody's going to be saying, you really got a good one here, Lord. You got nothing. And it's actually worse than that. You are my enemy, right? You are so set on serving yourself as a God. And I couldn't abide by that. And yet I made a choice, and it was you. This is so different from the world. Don't look for significance in you. No, I still hear that every once in a while, even in our own church family. Rarely, but I still hear it. So let me say it again. Don't look for significance in you. Don't try to build. You and I as sinners already build up our own self-image. That's part of the problem. We love ourselves plenty. That's part of the issue. Our significance comes from knowing that despite the fact that we're enemies of God, and despite the fact we got nothing, he looks at you and says, I love you. I love you. By the way, that's a good thing, right? Because when you're not having a good day, he still says that. This should humble these Hebrews, don't you think? It should just make them fall on their knees. God chose to do this. And he loves us in spite of all of what we are. Do you remember, in fact, he loved us this way from the beginning. It's not like we were a bunch of losers and then we finally got it together and he said, now I'm going to love you. This is the way I've responded to you ever since the beginning. Well, the beginning of what? The beginning of you as a nation. In fact, you can go back way beyond that, right? Ever since the beginning. Have you ever thought about your beginning? I want us to think about that just for a second. Your beginning. I'm talking about your birth. Do you remember being born? No, you don't. But other people do. But I want you to think about the day that you were born. And I mean the moment that you were brought into this world. I don't mean, and I'm not talking about the moment they got you, the nurses got you all cleaned up and looking really nice, gave a little blanket around you, so you look like the Gerber baby. That is not the way children come into this world. You know that. I don't want to break your heart here. I understand when we say, what a cute little baby. Because moms and dads, come on, right? You love her. You love him. They could be the ugliest thing on the planet. Still love them, right? Because they're yours. They are cute to you. You love them. That's what you're saying. But here's the truth. They are homely. Don't want to be too graphic here. In fact, even while I don't want to be too graphic, the prophet Ezekiel was. He went into detail so that Israel would know, don't think that God looked at you when you started this with him, when you became a people, and said, oh, what a wonderful child. He described in graphic detail, and I'll let you look at it yourself, what a human birth would have been looking like. Like 2 seconds. That's not very attractive at all, right? And then he says in Ezekiel, I want you to look at this afternoon. Would you do that? Because God sees us this way too. He doesn't say, oh, what a beautiful baby. I can't wait to get you into my family. No, he says, you know what? You look like, just born. You look like that. Who wants that? That's the whole point. And so I took you. Not after you're all cleaned up. Cut the umbilical cord. He actually talks about that too. Ezekiel does. Wash them up real good, wash their hair a little bit, put a little bassinet, now presentable. No. I loved you the way you came out. That's an awesome thought, don't you think? That's the basis of his acceptance. It's a humbling acceptance, don't you think? That God would ever want to do that. They should have been humbled by this. That should have affected their lives. It should continue to affect their lives. You might think, I thought of some of our kids, and even some of us big kids, You might think that, that your mother and your father waited until you got just so old, and then you got talented at something. You got good. And we have some young people, I thank God for them. I do. And I think we just barely scratched the surface of how people have been gifted in all age groups in this church. I can't wait to see what God wants to show us next. But it's not like the parents waited for their child to get good at something and really good at it. You're playing whatever instrument. We have people who can do that. Good at grades. Getting good grades, right? And it's not like mom and dad were saying, aha! Now I'll love you. No. Ask your parents. And I know some of us don't have our parents still on the planet. But you know what they would say? You are ours. And that is why we loved you. The other stuff is icing on the cake. That is not by the way, that's what saw us through some really good times with you. And that's what saw us through some really bad times with you. It's because you are ours, and we chose to love you. That's how God loves these Hebrews. waiting to get into the promised land. What a humbling acceptance that is. Awesome. Verse 14, he says, you shall be blessed. That's a passive voice verb. Hang in there. Okay, I know we're getting close to lunch. Blood sugar's going down. Passive voice means you didn't do this. You have, because of all of what I just mentioned and more, you Hebrews shall be blessed above all. Not you Hebrews will bless yourselves. You will be blessed. I'll be the one who does this. It's an awesome acceptance, humbling acceptance. Last thing I want us to see here this morning is in verses 17 through 21. It's a humbling key to success. A humbling key to success. Look with me at verses 17 through 21. If you should say in your heart, as if he knew they would, these nations are greater than I, how can I dispossess them? You shall not be afraid of them. You shall well remember what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all Egypt, the great trials which your eyes saw, and the signs and the wonders, and the mighty hand, the outstretched arm by which the Lord your God brought you out. So shall the Lord your God do to all the peoples of whom you are afraid. He knew they're afraid. Isn't that good to know? He didn't say, well, if you're ever, no, you are. You're right now, you're afraid. Moreover, verse 20, the Lord your God will send the hornet against them until those who are left and hide themselves from you perish. Now watch verse 21. You shall not dread them. Y'all hear that? You shall not dread them. For the Lord your God is, this is great, he's in your midst, a great and awesome God. Why shouldn't you be afraid? Is this some kind of hype? Like a pregame hype? Let's all get around and jump up and down like football players do, and let's go get them. I get kind of tickled by that. What did they say that makes any difference, right? It's still the same team. That's not what's happening. God gives them two reasons that he will make them, by his definition, successful. If they will humble themselves and recognize, number one, what I did for you. I have already done these things. You have seen this already. Has God ever shown grace at our church and other churches as well? Has God ever shown us answers to prayer? Is there any track record to answers to prayer here? Then he says, I want you to remember that, because I am still the same one. I want you to remember what I did against Pharaoh. What did God do against Pharaoh? That generation was long gone. Right? They're gone. How are they going to know this? Sometimes generations weren't real good at teaching the next generation, moms and dads, their children, like they should have. But it sounds like God clearly knew, you know about this. There's a lot of stuff they may not have shared with you, but I'm telling you, you know what I did to Pharaoh in the sea. So you know my past help. And on top of that, you know where I am. So, okay, Lord, where are you? I am in your midst. Awesome thought, don't you think? God didn't say, you all are really great. You got incredible prospects. Look at all the people in the history in the Old and New Testament. God used weak people on purpose. Let me give you some. Jacob, liar, not a good prospect. Moses, meekest man on the planet, not a good prospect. Gideon, scared, not a good prospect. 12 disciples, none of them seem to get it. And they're right there in the presence of the second person of the Trinity. They don't get it. Not good prospects. Church of Philadelphia, I don't mean Pennsylvania, the one in the book of Revelation, small. You don't have much power at all. Small and weak. Doesn't look like a good prospect to me. 2 Corinthians 12:9, God says that he revels in the fact of you being weak. Because it's when you and I, you now, centuries after this time period, Come before God and say, God, I don't have it. I don't have the resources. They look like giants. My past history has not been real good doing this kind of stuff. But I know what you have done. And I know where you are. By the way, that'll get you through a lot of stuff, won't it? I know what you have done by implication and what you can do. And God's response is, and you know what I want? I want you to humble yourself. Over and over and over again, Scripture. Gideon. How many hundreds of soldiers did he have? Oh, Gideon's already scared. He's scared, right? And God says, you take them down, and I'm about to sort them out for you. So I'm going to peel off the majority of them. Lord, have you seen the Midianites? They're like a sea of humanity. Yeah. Dear saint, lady, man, young person, senior saint, God is looking for us to talk to him and own it. God, I don't have this. I am just like this. I don't have this. And I know this is first and foremost about his plan when it comes to the children of Israel. They didn't have it together. And folks, it was in that environment, Old Testament and New Testament, that God delighted. Do you really think that's true? After all, think about this. If you wanted to be successful, don't you think Jesus should have made a corporation out of this? Right? You can fire people, hire people, advertise. He didn't do any of that. The church is an incredibly humble creation of God. But the gates of hell will not prevail against it. It's his idea, and that's a humble approach to ministry. I don't know what you're facing, but I want to plead with you. God does have a way of with us who are the just ones who are saved and living by faith, he does have a way of bringing us to these important chapters in our lives where we just say, God, we have to make progress here. And I have not been able to do that. And I don't know how to do that. But I know who you are. You're God and I'm not. And I'm about to make some choices that reflect that. You are exactly who you are. And I don't have it together. And dear saint, it might be the single thing that we need to do this morning, in the closing moments of this service, is to tell God honestly. Psalm 51. You want God to pay attention? Listen to this. A broken and contrite spirit, O God, thou wilt not despise. I thought about